case. You've been here for a while, right, in Japan?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, Matthew, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time, but since I found out that your mornings are like mine, you like the mornings, this is no hassle for you.
Not at all. It's a perfect time.
That's good. Let's start off with what I always start off with. Where were you born?
So I was born in downtown Salt Lake City,
Okay.
Utah, United States.
Right. And do you have other siblings too?
I do. I'm the oldest of 6.
Oldest of 6. How many years between you and the youngest?
Oh, between me and the youngest, there's probably a gap of about 15 years.
15 years, okay. Are all of you really close?
We are.
All of you, all 6 of you?
Yeah, all 6 of us are very close.
That's interesting. That's
yeah,
really
growing up, it was interesting. It was, I think, my parents did a good job not only raising us, but letting us raise each other. So even within the house, we had factions. Right. Where opinions diverged and very, very competitive. But as we grew up, we became very, very close.
Tell me the mixture. Okay, boy.
So I'm up top.
Yes.
2 sisters right below, and then 3 boys to round things off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said that you have. Your parents. I know, but also your religion helped you stay pretty close together, because that's a big cornerstone of the family. Is a really important part of being a Mormon.
It is,
Yes.
from a spiritual standpoint, a religious belief. We are taught and firmly believe that families are forever,
Right.
and with that forever commitment, you do whatever you can to work through differences of opinions, smooth out the bumps along the road, and we've really done a good job, staying together. When we're in the same place, getting together, rallying around each other in difficult times.
When I went to Salt Lake, I remember after I met the governor, and walking around the city, and I went to this one shop to buy some clothing. The tailor there, the guy there that owned it, took me around on a tour. We went into the temple and everything. And I told him a feeling I had. I said, if I were born here, there's no doubt that I would have been a Mormon.
Yeah, the great environment to grow
Yes.
up in. Very, very supportive. Being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has truly come with benefits and advantages, because not only within your own family unit, but within kind of the church unit, there's this idea of supporting and serving one another. So I remember, when I moved to law school, and we were in Salt Lake City at the time. I was just finishing up my degrees at the University of Utah. We were moving to Philadelphia so that I could obtain a Juris Doctor from Temple University, and had no money. Had a lot of excitement because I was embarking on a 3-year journey to pursue my law degree. Rented a U-Haul truck, packed up all of our belongings, put our daughter in the seat in between me and my wife, and off to Philadelphia we went, knowing no one. And when we pulled in, called the local bishop, and before you know it, we had 20 people that were there to help us unload our truck. We had people bringing us food. We had people, greeting us, and these are people that we had never even met before. So truly, the mindset of service and kind of Christ-like love is one that. No one's perfect or even close to that, but it's a good goal, a good aspiration, and when you can implement that, even part of that, it makes a major difference.
You make it look like I'm trying to get people to convert or something. Wait. Oh, Matt, let's go back to a little bit further. What type of child were you when you were growing up? Were you more academic or were you more physical?
Interestingly, probably a combination of both. And just share just a couple of brief instances with you. I mean, when I was 3, I was taught as part of my religion that Sunday was the Sabbath day, and it was a day that you devote to God and studying about Jesus Christ. And I also was taught that because it was a day of rest, you would go to church, and then you would come home. You wouldn't go shopping.
You're 3 years old, right?
I was 3 years old.
Wait. You didn't have all this concept in your head yet.
My parents had been teaching me that.
Okay.
And really interestingly, at the age of 3, I was the oldest, So, I think my parents...
But you didn't have other siblings yet.
No, and so my parents spent a lot of extra time on me.
Okay, all right.
And there was one day where I walked in the house and I declared to my mom, I said, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be a fire hydrant.
Now you're 3. You're not talking at 3 now. What age are you now?
Oh,
you walk in the house and.
Oh, I'm 3 when I'm walking in the house, and I'm declaring I want to be a fire hydrant. To which my mother corrected me, and said, "You mean a firefighter?"
Right.
I'm 3, right?
Okay.
And I said, "Oh yeah, firefighter."
Right.
To which my mother looked at me and she said, "That's a very dangerous job. Why don't we pick something else?" And so even at the age of 3, I started to think, okay, what should I be when I grow up? And so going back to the type of child that I was on Sundays, because I could only go to church and then visit with family, and they had probably worn me out during the week, I would wander around the neighborhood. And so I went to my next door neighbor's house almost every Sunday. They would leave the door open and I would just walk in and I would strike up a conversation. And so I'd have a
That's the kind of neighborhood you lived in, yes.
Yeah. So
everybody was really close.
Yeah, everybody's close. Strike up a conversation. And the man of the house, I think he would get a little bored, and so he would light his cigarette, to which I would proclaim, if you smoke, you're going to die. Wife thought it was the funniest thing in the world because she was trying to get him to quit, but he didn't take kind to that. Right. But it was every Sunday. So he would call my father and say, Jim, can you come and get your son? So my dad would bring me home, and next stop along my route was, I don't know if you remember Donnie and Marie Osmond.
Yes, okay.
But their grandparents lived on my street, and so that was stop number 2. So I would go in, walk into Grandpa and Grandma Osmond's house, and strike up a conversation, and Grandpa Osmond, at least as I remember, would get bored, and so he would hand me TV guide after TV guide. And I'm 3, I can't read, and there's no photos.
You're telling me you're doing, it's hard to see you at 3
There's
years
no,
old doing all
can
this.
you believe this?
Okay.
I mean, there is no photos in a TV guide. So I would get bored, and then I would go to the next house, which was a widow named Alice. And Alice loved me coming over. And I still can remember on her floral patterned sofa with Afghans that she had knitted, having a conversation with Alice. And I said, Alice, what should I be when I grow up? And Alice looked at me and she said, what are you good at? Now, if you ask a 3-year-old what they're good at, I mean, they have no idea. And so I said, Alice, I don't know, what am I good at? She said, Matt, she said, you are good at talking. And I said, oh. So she said, let's think of some jobs that talking would be something that you would be good at. So I remember her saying, maybe you could be a teacher. And I asked what that was, and she described it. She said, maybe you could be a politician. I don't remember what she said. I just remembered I had a hard time with the word.
I understand.
And so I don't remember what the explanation was. And she said, maybe you could be a lawyer. And I said, what's a lawyer? She said, well, a lawyer is somebody that talks a lot, somebody that helps people. And she said, your dad's a lawyer. And so at that point in time when I was, at that point in time when I was 3, I went, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. And then, fast forward, here I am I think I was in 1st grade at the time, had a Japanese elementary school teacher in Salt Lake City. Her name was Mrs. Fuji. And I would complete my work and my tasks so quick that I would get bored. And so when she was not looking, she'd turn her head, I would just dart out of the room and I would go into the library, pull an encyclopedia off of the shelf and just start to read. And to her credit, she didn't stop me. She came to me and she said, Matt, I need to know when you're leaving. So as soon as you are done with your assignments, just let me know. And then you can go into the library and you can read. And so it became my challenge to get done with my assignments and my work as quick as I could because I really wanted to learn. And so I would just dart off to the library by myself and I would just open up the encyclopedia and I would read. So that was probably the age of 6 or 7.
Okay, now sports. What kind of sports did you eventually get involved in?
So I love sports. And
I know from your nose being broken the other day playing baseball.
That's right.
You had on your Facebook page, you said, concrete 1, Matt 0. And your nose was all swollen up.
I know. At the time, at the age of, I think I was 50 at the time. I would not recommend it. But no, I think baseball baseball was a big part of my life very early on.
So that's okay.
Basketball. You know, I was always the shortest until probably my senior year of high school, but I was very quick. And it probably explains why I'm a good outside shooter in basketball, because I was so short and I needed to get over everybody, right?
Okay.
So really baseball and basketball, but anything with the ball except for probably soccer, you know, I have been involved
Was
in.
that really popular when you were growing up?
Soccer?
Yes.
Not at all.
I didn't think so. I didn't think so.
No.
Football, if anything.
Yeah, and football, I had a lot of people encourage me to play football because of my speed, but my parents wouldn't let me because
You were
it was
smart.
too dangerous.
You probably didn't have the weight either.
Oh yeah, I
But
did. I did not.
It wouldn't
I did
have
not.
mattered. They would have killed you.
Oh, they would have killed me. Yeah. I mean,
you wouldn't be talking like you're talking now.
No, I mean, my nose would not have been the issue. There would have been much more. But you know, I ran track and Utah. Incredible skiing. My parents didn't ski, so I taught myself how to ski. Played tennis.
Wait.
You know, taught myself how to play golf.
Wait, Mom and Dad were involved with you. You're the first child.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So how'd your other brothers and sisters turn out? Were they just as precocious as you were?
You know, everybody's different. I mean, everybody's
But
completely
anyone
different.
close to you? Who's the closest to being like you?
Oh, you know, it's a really
a hard one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, you know, my sister directly below me is incredibly tenacious and incredibly competitive. And, you know, particularly since the two of us were so close. I mean, you know, I talked about factions. She was the head of one, I was the head of other. I mean, now we're incredible friends. But
growing up, that was
growing up, it wasn't.
each of those nemesis, right?
That's right. You know, and she wouldn't back down, and I wouldn't back down, right? You know, I would say in terms of similarities, probably number 5, Steve.
Steve
Is probably kind of the closest in terms of you know,
But
similarities.
then he was no competition to you because your age was so far
No,
apart.
absolutely.
Right,
From my mindset, it was more of a mentorship.
Right, that's what I was thinking. That's how you'd look at it.
Yeah.
But you could see that he had that drive and he wanted to win. And
Absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
That's interesting because the dynamics of a family are so important. It really does make who you become.
It does.
In a
Yeah,
way.
there's no question.
Wow. Do all of your siblings have children?
We do.
All of you do. Are you the only one that lives outside the United States?
Yes. Yeah. The only one that lives outside the United States, the only one that's ever lived outside the United States.
But did you ever travel as a family when you were younger? Did you travel out? Your father's a lawyer.
Well, so you know, it's really interesting, you know, because the lawyer in my father's a little deceptive, simply because we never had any money. And
well, you had 6 kids. I
well,
mean, come on.
6 kids. Yeah, he was a lawyer for the Utah state government. Back in the day, governmental lawyers were paid very little. And so, you know, part of my drive growing up as a child was understanding my parents did not have money and trying to go out and saying, okay, I'm going to take care of myself. So, I mean, the minute that I turned 14, I was eligible to throw papers and have a paper route. And so, boom, you know, now I'm a paper boy. I'm going to be able to take care of myself. You know, I'm not going to have to rely on my parents. So, I mean, that was my mindset, you know, all the way up, you know, through college, you know, law school and the like was, okay, I need to support myself.
And your mother took care of the home.
She did. I mean, she
that's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job with 6 kids and, you know,
and
trying
she's not getting paid for it.
No, trying to give us all opportunities. Right. You know, she would, to supplement the income, she would teach piano lessons. But, you know, part of a mother's sacrifice for a son was I could play the piano pretty well. And so she wanted me to have the best of the best in terms of piano teachers. And so I graduated from her very quickly. And so now she's paying somebody else to teach me. And then I graduate from that teacher, and now I'm training with a concert pianist who charges a lot. But my mother was insisting that she wanted to at least give me that opportunity. So, you know, kudos to her. But yeah, it was, you know, so our family vacations, we had a big green station wagon, and it was driving wherever my father had a work convention. And so we would just drive.
But that was fun for you guys when you were young, I bet you.
It was.
You
You know,
you didn't know.
We didn't know. I mean, there was one year where my father was kind of in between jobs. He had been with the Security and Exchange Commission and had gotten laid off. The economy wasn't good. And you know, our vacation was literally going to the next town over, going to a public park, and spending the day there, right? I mean, so that was one type of a vacation. Two, you know, one year there was a legislative conference, because he worked for the Utah State Legislature, in San Diego. And so, you know, boy, we had never been to California before. And so we went. The conference hotels were the Intercontinental Hotel. And I don't remember how he pulled it off, but anyway, somehow we ended up with 2 rooms. I'm sure he got one for work and decided to pay for another one. And so as the oldest, I was in charge of one room. My parents were in the other room. And as we were exploring, we stumbled across this minibar. And the minibar had all this free food and snacks and drinks. And so I remember my sister, I think, you know, tasted, it was like tonic water or something like that. And she's like, ooh, she dumps it all out in the sink.
Okay.
And so then the next day when they came to service the room, I mean, we had cleared out like everything that was non-alcohol based,
all this free
stuff, and they presented my dad with a bill, and boy, I'll tell you, I mean, he was not only ready to blow, but we checked out of that hotel, found a Days Inn near the Tijuana border. The pool was boarded up. So we went from this beautiful Intercontinental Hotel overlooking San Diego Bay to this Days Inn on the Tijuana border, our whole vacation budget. So anyway.
The family, the 6 kids. That is so interesting. That's a good
Yeah.
one. That's a good story. So tell me, so growing up, after you finished, let's say junior high school, you go to high school, you start thinking about what your career is going to be, for real.
Oh, I'm starting from the age of 3.
You already knew at the age of 3 that you're going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a lawyer.
Absolutely. And I talked to my dad constantly anytime I would find...
so that never changed?
Yeah, never changed. Anytime I would find a lawyer, you know, we would have a conversation. My father would take me to like work events so I could meet other lawyers. And it never changed. And so like in junior high, they would give me aptitude tests, you know,
Right, okay.
fill out, you know, what are your interests, because they wanted to give you a picture of what you wanted to do. And I would try and game those aptitude tests because I'm like, how would a lawyer answer this, right? So that the test could confirm to me that,
Okay.
you know, and so at the end of the day, I was, oh yeah, definitely
Lawyer.
want to be a lawyer. So even in high school, it was what classes do I take? What activities do I engage in that are going to help me become a lawyer? So speech and debate was a big part of it.
And you're good on the debate team.
Yeah. Yeah. So
okay, so then
I
you
did-
finished
I
high
did-
school.
I did well.
You go into college. Where'd you go, to Brigham Young?
No, Brigham Young University was a swear word in our house.
What was that? Your father tried to get in, they didn't let him or something? Or
No. It's very interesting. It's very interesting growing up in Utah. So Brigham Young University is a university operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But you know, just up the road in Salt Lake City, you've got the University of Utah, and they're incredibly fierce rivals when it comes to athletics.
Okay.
And not only did I grow up in a University of Utah household, you know, my grandfather was a professor of civil engineering at the University of Utah. You know, my father had gone to the University of Utah. My mother had gone there.
So this
all
is
of my aunts
serious,
and uncles.
Serious rivalry.
Serious rivalry. I mean, you know, when University of Utah and Brigham Young University play, I mean, you know, pranks happen between, you know, families and, you know, from university to university. You know, University of Utah folks, like, they would sneak down to Provo, Utah, and in the fountains they would put red dye because red is University of Utah colors, and you know, Brigham Young University would come up and they would try and paint something on there's a block U on the mountain just up in Salt Lake to try and paint it blue, and so anyway, I mean, just really an intense rivalry. So there was no way ever I would be going to Brigham Young University. So I went to the University of Utah for a year, and University of Utah for a year initially. And you know, as a member of my church, completely volunteer. You do not have to do it, but I felt compelled to volunteer to serve to become a service missionary to go out and to serve others and do service projects, right? And to proselyte, become an elder. And you do not get any money from the church.
I understand. You have to work your way back, they say, in a way.
Yeah. So no money from the church. It's either you, your parents, your local congregation provides the financial support. The church has missions around the world, and so I volunteered. And
do they pick the place, or you get to pick where you want to go?
No, they pick.
That's what I thought.
So you're paying for it,
right,
and you don't get a pick. So I tell people that my experience in Japan was involuntary yet voluntary, in terms of coming here.
Yes,
because I had no interest in Japan whatsoever.
Except for that one teacher you had.
Except for
when
Miss
you were
Fuji.
young, you're right, Miss Fuji.
And my neighbor across the street, actually, Mimi was her name.
Okay.
She was Japanese, married to a Mexican gentleman.
Okay.
And so every day during the summer, we would play baseball with their son and daughter out in front of the house. So, I mean, I had a lot. I didn't realize it at the time.
The seed was planted.
That's there was so much, and I had a number of friends that. The Kimuras were on my baseball team, right? And so I didn't realize it, but surrounding me were all of these just incredible, either first generation or second generation, Japanese that were a big part of my youth. And so, when I first received the assignment from, the church, I was sitting here thinking, let's see, I know the Japanese, they eat rice, and I hated rice. I mean, American rice is terrible, the long grain stuff. I'm like, this tastes like cardboard. And this is back in the 1980s, the idea that...
You never had good rice.
Well, never had good rice. And the idea that I would eat raw fish, I'm like, I'm a meat and potatoes kid, right? I mean, there's no way I'm eating anything raw. And, I tried to learn French in middle school,
okay.
and that was a no-starter. I mean, it was a learn and purge class where, at the end of the day, after 3 years, I could count to 100. Tell my girlfriend Jennifer I loved her in French, and tell people I'm not a pencil, right? I mean, that was the extent of what it was.
Okay.
And so I'm like, there's no way I'm learning Japanese. So my immediate impression is my parents and friends and family were like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going, how do I diplomatically unvolunteer? I'm like, this is not good, right? But upon reflection, that was where I was like, I've come into contact with all these wonderful Japanese people. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing this for others. I'm not doing this for myself. And I'm sure, God's got his hand in this. He's going to take care of me. So
please.
help me out, right? So anyway, off to Japan I went.
Okay.
And
where was it? Where did you go?
Hokkaido. And it was so cold. I
bet you have been walking.
I was close.
Were you really?
I was close. Yeah. So there's
they really sent you.
Yeah. So
Japan.
there's a couple cities right below Wakkanai. One's called Naido.
I've been there.
And the other one is Shibetsu.
Shibetsu. Yes.
And so I was in both of those cities for a stint. But
you and how many other people? How many people?
So it's
they usually have two.
So it's interesting. So I mean they pair you up,
right?
So in those small cities, I was in an apartment of 2. Other cities, I'll have an apartment of 4. So, like I was in a city between Asahikawa and
You mean
Sapporo.
village? You mean not city? That little village?
It is. It
village,
absolutely is a village.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting, though. For the missionaries that go to Hokkaido, the term is, okay, you're one of the frozen chosen. And it was so cold because.
But you were 19 or 20. How old were you?
So I was 18 when I
18
when I volunteered. 18 when I entered the mission field.
Because so you went into college when you were 17, obviously.
I did. So
Okay.
I'm like the youngest in my grade. So
would
I
think
was
so,
always
yes.
the latest to get my driver's license, the latest to. The latest.
But you were a good student,
date.
weren't you? You got good grades.
I was the smallest, easiest to pick on. Got
That's what I was
good
going to
grades.
say. That affected you in some ways. I mean, being the smallest.
Oh yeah.
I would think mine was a little bit different. My grades were no good, but my father put me in a year early.
Oh, interesting.
And that is really hard for a boy.
Yeah.
Because we developed so slow in the first place.
Yeah.
So I was always the least mature.
Mm-hmm.
I was the weak. I could never hit the tether ball hard enough.
Right.
They could throw me around. They were forever swinging me around by my arm.
Yeah.
And letting me go and roll all over the place. So it was just. Really
I remember those days well. Well, and it was there was.
So it's not just me.
No, there was a point. And it probably was, I think it was at the end of elementary school going into middle school where there was some talk about putting me in the grade ahead. And I was the youngest, right, in my grade.
Already,
and
yeah.
then to advance me another year, and I thought about it, and I just told my parents. I said, "I'm just not interested."
That was good.
So yeah,
that would have put you in.
I think that
would put you in a
good.
nerd mode because you would have really been isolated.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it, right?
Yeah.
Because I do remember, elementary school days being swung around by my arms and thrown.
And just thrown, and you just please let me learn someplace safe, please.
I'm like, I don't want to be studying with those guys that are older than me. I'm like, they'll kill me. Right.
That's interesting. Okay, so you go to Hokkaido. So you're up there for how long? 2 years?
So it's a 2-year commitment. I got really sick, and so when I was up in Hokkaido.
When you talking about when you first heard you were going to go?
No, it was after the fact. I mean, long story short. I mean, I started to, of all things, have problems with my earlobe. And so every time I would go indoors, my earlobe would grow to another degree, and I had this massive ball inside of my earlobe in the middle of the winter, and I'm in Shibetsu, and so I asked a church member for a doctor referral, and so they sent me to their doctor, and I walked in. I'm sure this gentleman had received his training prior to World War II.
He wanted to lance it immediately.
There's no question. I wish. I mean, he looked at my ear, and he was feeling it, and it really hurt. And every time I would go in, it would just throb. And so he looked at it, and he was like, "Kore wa gan desu ne."
No, he did not.
He said, "This is cancer."
I know, I understand.
And this is pre-internet days, and I'm thousands and thousands of miles away from my parents. And I've got this gentleman who's probably 80 or 85 who's looking at my earlobe telling me that I have cancer in most likelihood. And I'm sitting here going, I've never heard of cancer of the earlobe, but in my mind I'm going, I guess you could get cancer anywhere. And then I'm like, but at least it's in my earlobe, so if they caught it quick enough, maybe it won't spread to my brain. So here I am, 19 at the time, just all these thoughts. And so he said, I'm going to refer you to a cancer specialist in Nairo, which is another village. The fact that they had a cancer specialist there, now that I reflect, I'm like, why did they have a cancer specialist there, right? But anyway, so I go, and so this is probably the youngest doctor in the world. And they are so enamored at this hospital by seeing someone who is blonde hair and blue-eyed that they send in probably every nurse that they have in the hospital
to make sure they get a chance
get a chance. And the doctor's looking at this, and he starts to laugh, and he said, "This isn't cancer." He said, "You got frostbite so bad that," he said, "every time you go indoors is when it hurts the most, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You got frostbite so bad that the pores froze shut, and so every time that you go in and you start to sweat, the sweat can't come out, and so the sweat's kind of like crystallized." And so he's giving me this explanation, and maybe I missed some of it, given my Japanese level, but I thought that he was going to lance it, but he gave me medicine, like 7 or 8 different types of medicine, which set off a chain reaction. I'm sure I was allergic to this medicine, and I just kept on taking it, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think. And so went to the point where I went to the local hospital in Shibetsu, and they didn't want to check me in. So every day they would put me on a table, give me an IV, and this went on for like a week and a half. And at that point in time, I'd lost probably 25 pounds that I didn't have in the first place. And I was like, there's a mission leader that was down in Sapporo, Japanese fellow, and I couldn't communicate how serious this was and where I was, but I got to the point where I called him up. I'm like, I'm done. I said, as much as I believe in this and what I'm doing, and I want to help people, there's other ways to do this. I'm going to die. I need to go back to the U.S. and I need to get
How long had you been here by that time?
I'd been in Japan probably 9 months at the time.
9 months by that time.
9 months by that point in time.
And how much of that was spent being sick? The last
probably
months?
Probably the last month. The last month. I fought that off for a month, but so I left, and there was a lot of disappointment because I had anticipated fully doing the entire 2 years, But I mean, there were so many lessons that I learned in that, and became, much stronger person through all of that. And literally from a physical standpoint, I have never been sicker in my life. So kind of hitting physical rock bottom, the mental toll that takes. Here I am as a missionary trying to serve others and perform Christ-like service, and kind of hitting rock bottom across the board. I mean, I think oftentimes in your darkest hours you learn a lot, and so I learned a lot about myself and my resolve to do good and to serve others. That became even stronger. My relationship with God became even stronger.
How did they treat you when you came back? Were they sympathetic to your?
It depended on the person. Really.
So some of the guys were really upset with you for not toughing it out.
Yeah, and I think that was. I think it was a different day, and I think a lot of people didn't know, why I would turn around and come back. They didn't realize that I was so sick. I would, but in a conversation or something like that, right? If they're like, hey, did you serve a mission? Yeah, was it 2 years? No, it was like a year. And then people would look at you like, so what did you do?
You're right.
And then, I got really sick, and then you can kind of see the wheels moving in people's eyes, right, in terms of, are they judging? And at first that really bothered me, right? I did have a neighbor come up to me like shortly after I got home, and he knew that I'd been sick. And I was out shooting baskets on the hoop, and I'd been back for like probably 2 or 3 months, and I'm just kind of nursing myself back to health. And he was just like, we were so proud of you when you left, but when you came home, things changed. And he just turned around and walked away. I mean, I couldn't believe that anyone would say something like that. Now, he was the exception, and
how long did that haunt you? Well, you're talking about it now, so it hasn't left you yet.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of those things where, I'm very, very optimistic, right? And so even when you have something like that happens, the negativity drives me to be positive. Mm-hmm. And so in my life, like from our church, when I have seen missionaries volunteer and go out and struggle, maybe it's physically, maybe it's mentally, spiritually, whatever it is, that comment of that neighbor has driven me my entire life to go above and beyond to support others, right? So it's one of those things where, at the time, disappointed, haunted for a while, but, as I reflected on that, I was like, boy, I never would want to make that comment, and hopefully inspire others, to do that. So when we lived in Wyoming, sure enough, neighbor across the street, he went to South America, ended up getting a tapeworm, got really, really sick, similar, had to come home. Parents were just, devastated. But I was able to go and have a conversation with the parents about, look, this was my experience. This is where I ended up. Your son's going to be fine. He needs to get healthy. And then when the son came home, he was so discouraged. I was able to have the conversation with him. That's good. Right, and so I could see having that conversation. His mood flipped immediately because he's like, okay, this isn't something that I did, to cause this, and it's something that I can grow from.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Taking that negative and flipping it positive.
Isn't it something? Yeah. It's interesting. It seems like this journey we're all on. What they say, I've heard the same before. They say, experience is something you always get 10 minutes after you really need it.
Absolutely.
Life is that way. If everything goes fine, you're not learning anything.
Not at all, right?
It's really nothing to push you.
Yeah, I mean, and there's opposition in all things, right?
That's right.
And through that opposition, at that point, I think that's where you truly grow. Right?
You find out who you are. The military does it. Having gone to the military, I didn't need it like a lot of the guys did because I was raised by my father. Mm-hmm. But the basic training, that's what that's all about. They want you to learn that it's an inside-out proposition,
right?
Not an outside-in.
Absolutely.
And you find out who you are, and not everyone makes it through.
They don't. And I think in life, I'm a big believer as we make mistakes. I mean, that's where we learn, that's where we grow, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to do that again, or I'm going to do that differently, right? And it's really focusing on, what are you going to do better next time around?
When you got home and you got over that, you nursed yourself back into health, then where'd you go? What happened from there?
So that was really interesting. In downtown Salt Lake City, there was a congregation that church services were held in Japanese. And I was, I was bent on not only physically recuperating, but not losing my Japanese. And so I was like, okay, what can I do to keep my Japanese up? And I really, in that period of time, grown to love and respect the Japanese. And so showed up at church and was listening to church services in Japanese. And one day, as I was sitting on the front row of Sunday school and getting ready to do Bible study, sweet young thing comes and sits 2 chairs away from me. There's no one in the middle, and we strike up a conversation. And after church, continue to talk, and I invite her to go to a movie the next night. I show up, and she doesn't answer the door. My future wife answers the door. And so we had one date, and I ended up at that time, meeting my wife, and that week I had a second date with the lady. Her name was Ayako, and I went to pick her up, and she wasn't there.
So they were staying together?
In the same place. Actually, different apartments, same building, gotcha. But Ayako had asked my wife, Noriko, future wife Noriko, to come and check me out and kind of interview me
before they
went out. Well, it was Ayako's fault. She was dating 3 people at the time. So when I went to pick her up the second time, there was a letter on her door to me that was written in Japanese, and I couldn't read and write at the time. I could do maybe hiragana and some katakana, but it was kanji, and so I was like, okay, this is like a Dear John letter or an emergency, something happened. And so as I was thinking about solutions, I was like, oh yeah, Noriko, she lives in this building. So I went to the mailboxes, and she had put her last name there, and I was like, Japanese name, gotta be her. Went and knocked on the door and asked her to read me the letter, and I think I came out of her apartment 5 or 6 hours later. So we just talked and talked.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So it was great. About a month later, so Noriko was out of money, headed back to Japan. Pre-internet days, telephone calls are 2 minutes or $2 a minute, and I was just like, okay, she's the one. She's special. I have no money. If I don't act now, I may lose her forever. So at the end of a month, with a lot of prayer, a lot of faith, I asked Noriko to marry me, and 5 months later we were married.
She didn't leave then?
No, she left. She went back to Japan, but I chased her back here. So we ended up getting married in Gunma Prefecture.
So you came, you're in the funds and stuff, and flew yourself back out of here.
Yeah.
Did you ever go back? Then you did go back because you talked about.
I did. So we were here. We got married here. Again, both of us college students, no money, even without a college degree. Up in Gunma Prefecture, I could make pretty good money. Teaching English. I created my own English school. My mother-in-law taught ikebana, and she taught shuji, and so she had a classroom that I could use to teach English. And so I did that for several months, where I was probably teaching 45 hours a week, and going, okay, this is great, but I want to be an international lawyer, right? I want to be a lawyer. Now it's international because of the Japan connection. And so I'm like, I don't know if this is going to get me where I want to go. Let me look and see if I can get a job with a Japanese company. And so I looked at the Japan Times. Back in the day, if you remember, every Monday they would have their big job boards. That was where everybody found their bilingual jobs. And as I would go to the train station in Gunma and the city that we were in, that was the only place that sold the Japan Times. And I every Monday would get it, and I would look. And there was a company called Yokogawa Denki that had a subsidiary in the city next to where we were. That was in Ashikaga in Tochigi. And they were looking for somebody who could do international marketing, technical translation, and they wanted a native English speaker. And I was like, okay, so how many people are in Tochigi that could do that, right? I'm like, there's probably not very many. And I said, the fact that I now live in this area, like literally in the city next door, right, in Gunma Prefecture and Kiryu, I'm like, maybe I've got a shot. But all these obstacles against me, right? I mean, I don't really read and write Japanese very well, and they want somebody to do translation. Like, that's a problem. I have no experience doing international marketing. That's kind of a problem. I don't have a college degree. Okay, that would be, an issue. Here I am, like 20 at the time. I look very young, and so when I was 20, I probably looked like I was 12, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this job. But I'm like, you know what? Never stopped me before. Always, just press forward. If I could work for a Japanese company doing this would be a great springboard to a career in international business law. And so I had my wife put together my resume in Japanese. Remember, I don't write very well.
Right.
And it looked really cool, when it got done. And I did my cover letter. And interestingly, this company made hydrological and meteorological instruments. And one of the classes that I had taken at the University of Utah as part of my undergraduate kind of general studies was a meteorology class. And so I talked about the meteorology class. I talked about being able to speak Japanese. I spoke about all of the things that I had done, in high school, my missionary service and the like. And off it went, and I got a call. They wanted to interview me. And I was like, oh, I am in trouble, because I'm sure they're going to ask me, can you read and write Japanese? And I'm going to have to be truthful, right? Honesty and integrity are a major part of who I am. And I was just like, okay, if I say no, there's no way I'm getting the job. If they ask me about my experience doing marketing and translation, I really don't have, much, if any. Like, that's going to be a problem. Every place I'm going to have a shortcoming. So I was reflecting back to what my strengths were, right? Because I'm selling my strengths not only in my cover letter, but I've got to do it in person now. And I'm like, my strengths? Talking. And so my strategy going in was I was going to try and flip the interview so that instead of the interviewer asking me questions, I was going to ask the interviewer questions instead, right? So Sato Bucho, he got in probably 2 questions before I flipped it. And so I just was asking questions after question after question. And I was it was going really well, and at least so I thought, and but I was running out of material. And so I asked him a random question. I said, if you were to hire me for this position, is there anything that I would be, anything that I would need to do like after company hours? And he reflected on that. He's like, well, we would have overtime from time to time. We are like a family here. We go and sing karaoke, we go drinking, we go out to dinner. From a company standpoint, we have company bowling outings, we do company picnics. He said, we have a company baseball team. There was my in.
Okay.
And so I was like, really? You've got a company baseball team? He said, yeah, we take it like really serious. We play against other companies. It's our goal to make it to like the company World Series.
Right.
And I said, wow. I said, I've played baseball since the age of 3. And I said, and he's like, really? I said, yeah. He's like, what position do you play? I said, well, I play shortstop. I play first base. I play third base. I said, during high school, they converted me into a pitcher. And I said, in one baseball game, I struck out 15 batters with my wicked curveball. And he was so excited that he ran over to the phone, literally picked it up, and I hear him talking to somebody, and he said, hey, we're interviewing for this position. I've got this American guy in here. He could pitch on our baseball team. And then I hear a, hai, wakarimashita, right? Okay, I understand. So he said, follow me. So before I know it, up 3 flights of stairs to the CEO's office, where for the next hour we talked about the differences between American baseball and Japanese baseball.
Nothing about your job.
Nothing about my job. Nothing about my abilities. Nothing. It was all baseball, right? Why do Japanese teams bunt versus U.S. teams, which hit for the fence? I mean, just those type of questions. And so I walked out of there going, I've got this.
And you knew it.
I knew it. And I got the job.
Yeah.
How
long did you work for them?
So I worked for Yokogawa probably for interesting story. Probably 4 years, but it was a little. I mean, I don't do anything in a straight path. As you're kind of discovering, right?
Okay.
But so I worked for them probably for 2.5 years, maybe coming up on about 3 years, and. The international work was drying out, and they didn't have a lot of work, and so I would just go in every day and go over my original translations, which were terrible,
Okay.
and fix those. But I felt really bad that here I am showing up every day at the company, drawing a salary, really not having a lot to work on. And so I decided I was going to go and get a Japan Times and kind of check out what was there. And so ended up landing a job with a Sony group company, professional audio and video department, doing translation and desktop publishing. And I told Yokogawa, I said, look, I feel really bad about not having work. So I said, why don't we do this? I've got another job. I haven't accepted it yet. Let me take it. That'll be my full-time job. And then I will do all of your jobs on a freelance basis. And I have a 2.5 hour one-way trip into Tokyo every day. So that gives me 5 hours on the train. And I'll just pick up any work that you have. I'll translate it on the train, and translate it on the way back, type it up. I'll bring it, I'll drop it off to you the next morning at 5:30 a.m. And they're like, that's great. So I continued to play baseball for them.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. That had to be one of the things.
Continued to play baseball for them. I'd been kind of with Sony Group for a year or so, and Yokogawa came to me and said, hey, we would like you to go to the Philippines for 3 or 4 months. And I'm like, I'm working for these guys. And they're like, we've got this massive job. You have been working on all of the explanation manuals, right? We need your expertise. We're going to send you with an engineer. And at that point in time, I was like, okay, this is probably a good time for me to quit Sony, go to the Philippines. Went to the Philippines for about 4 months, came back, finished up my last year at the University of Utah. So I got 2 degrees from the University of Utah in 2 years. A year before my mission, and then a year after all of that, and then off to law school I went.
Wow, that is beautiful. What a story, my goodness. Yeah. So tell me this, so now, where are you now in your life? I know you're the dean and CEO
That's
of
right.
Temple.
Yeah.
And you've been in that job for how long now?
So I accepted that job and came here. I guess I arrived in the middle of the pandemic when the country was closed in August of 2020. Mm-hmm. So we're coming up on about 3 years now.
Did you move them into the new campus? Were you part of that, or was that done before, prior?
So the new campus in Sangenjaya, that was done right before I got
That's
here.
what I thought, just a little bit before.
So it was September of 2019 was when that campus opened, and it was in operation until February of 2020, and then the pandemic happened, and then boom, closed down for about 6 months. When I came in August, we were operating in person. A lot of the universities and schools were still closed, but COVID numbers in Japan were very low, and so we had probably 25% of our classes in person, 75% of the classes online, and so as many other places were not dealing with the in-person, we had that going on, which was really good.
Right. Because they didn't make it mandatory.
Never did.
They never did, but they understood how their society works. There's peer pressure and everything else. But
Absolutely.
you also understand the gaijin factor we have.
Well, and it was interesting. It was interesting as well because as I came in, fortunately I was granted special permission to come in even in the middle of the pandemic because of the fact that President, CEO, and Dean of Temple University, and a recognition that this literally is the oldest, longest, standing, biggest American university or foreign university for that matter in Japan. So I was very fortunate that I was able to come on in, and through that I was able to develop some relationships with people in the government. And it was interesting. I was having a sit-down conversation with a number of the lawmakers and people in the ministry, and they wanted the schools to be in person. I mean,
but let me ask this now.
Yeah.
What made you decide to go that route? Because I don't think other universities necessarily try to get involved with the politics.
Oh, absolutely.
And you did. I see the pictures you have with these guys, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Finance. I'm saying, wait just a minute. And why did you change the name from just president? You're the first time I've ever seen president and CEO. Who brought in the CEO part? Tell me
so I mean, in terms of kind of the political route, Temple is so unique, right? I mean, 1980s, 1990s, about 40 foreign universities, predominantly American, decided to come to Japan and set up campuses. They're all gone. I mean, you know, Temple's kind of the survivor, right? And you know, even when I came back, so you know, I ended up getting my law degree from Temple. I studied here as a law student. Phenomenal experience, and that's kind of where my love from Temple comes in. Did the international law thing in the United States, you know, based in Florida. And I come back in 2003 as a law faculty and director of the law program of Temple University. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but I mean, Temple was really financially struggling. So much so that there were conversations in Philadelphia about how much longer can we do this? And you know, at the time, Temple had decided to go unconventional in terms of who they would bring in as their dean, president, CEO, and turned to a gentleman by the name of Kirk Patterson. He was an AIG, doing marketing, PhD from a Canadian university. You know, you wouldn't think of
first time they did
that profile.
That's right.
To lead, you know, a branch campus or an institution, and it was. They'd never done anything like that.
Yeah,
but in the mindset of the folks in Philadelphia, they're like, okay, we need a native. Well, we need somebody who speaks Japanese at a native level. We need somebody who knows the business, can get along and maybe get into some political circles that your traditional academic that they had sent from Philadelphia just couldn't do.
Right.
And so as I came in as law professor and law program director, Kirk, I think, quickly figured out that I've got just this boundless energy. And so he quickly elevated me within his team. And the goal at that point in time was, we need to be officially recognized by the Japanese government. You know, we have gone it alone. When Temple first came in 1982, there was a sit-down meeting with the Minister of Education, and Temple was talking about how they wanted to bring American-style education in English to the Japanese and make it convenient enough so that there could be a base of education here, and that could springboard them overseas. That was the initial concept that was there. Secondarily, there was a graduate teaching English as a second language, so training professors, right, or teachers to teach English better. That was the initial concept underlying what Temple wanted to do. But as they were having this meeting with MEXT and the minister was very quiet until the question was posed, you know, let us know how we can work together and what we can do for you. And the minister looked at the Temple delegation and said, you can go back to the United States. And the delegation just went, whoa.
Yes.
And so at that point in time, it was very clear that Japan did not want to work with Temple. This was 1982.
In 1982 he said that, okay.
1982 is when he said it.
Okay.
But, I mean, that set Temple on a different trajectory because now they needed to be partners with someone, because back in the day, I mean, it was really a joint venture, right, to come on in and to do business in Japan for a foreign entity. So the first joint venture partner recruited all these students for Temple to really come in non-degree English studies, got several hundred folks, collected the tuition, and he bolted. So now Temple is 0 for 2 in terms of coming on in, but the Temple name and brand is out, and literally, this gentleman walked away with $300,000, $350,000 worth of money, and Temple had to go. Okay, do we leave, or do we just provide? I mean, these folks had already paid for it, right? So Temple decided to swallow that pill. Had to go out and find another partner, right? And so there were several partnerships that happened along the way, and it just was not working very well, right? So at some point in time, Temple decided we've got to go independent. The Japanese government still did not want to play ball, and so Temple, to become an educational entity, I mean, that's what we are, right? It didn't work inside of the Japanese stricture. And so as a result, we had to incorporate. And so Temple is public, nonprofit, and that's even how we operate here. I'm 100% wholly owned. But because the Japanese government would not play ball with us, that's why I became president. Well, that's why I'm in a position that is president and CEO, because that's how we have to function. Now, 2005, so here we are, 23 years later. International education becomes a trade issue between the United States and Japan. And so it gets elevated. The U.S. Trade Representative, senators in the United States, including Senator Joe Biden. You have the U.S. Embassy. Temple has friends in the Japanese government at that point in time from the politics. Japan is now strapped with, okay, we need a solution to the Temple problem. All of these universities have come in. They have found it's impossible to operate here, and they've left. And Temple's the one that's left. We need to do something. And so Japan changes the education law to put in a new category of educational entity that is foreign university, comma, branch campus. Okay. Temple University, comma, Japan campus. So that was, that piece of legislation really was, Temple was the trailblazer, right? Temple was, hey, we need to get this done. Before that point in time, we couldn't sponsor student visas. So if a student wanted to come and do their undergraduate or their graduate degree here, it didn't work. A student could come for short-term study abroad on a cultural activities visa, but that was only good for 6 months, right. And it could only be extended once. The Japanese universities, very interestingly, Temple University's Japan campus is identical to main campus, right? If you study here in Tokyo, your degree comes from the home institution in Pennsylvania. There's nothing on the degree that says Japan, but the Japanese universities wouldn't talk to us because we were not recognized. Back in the 1980s when we came in, the Japanese government asked Temple not to use the daigaku word. Don't use university, right. Because that will imply that you're approved by the Japanese government, and you're not, right? Mm-hmm. And there had been some talk about becoming a gakko hojin, right? Become kind of a Japanese university educational entity. But if you become a gakko hojin, you're all in Japanese university, and you're subject to control of your professors, of your curriculum, of your facilities.
Can't fire people, right?
Yeah, and the type of building that you have, the credentials that folks have. And as an American university delivering 100% American curriculum with an international twist, you can't have that dictated to you. Even right now, for instance, there's restrictions on Japanese universities based in Tokyo rolling out new programs. The ministry does not want universities to do that because they want to drive the students out into universities outside of Tokyo. Why would we ever want to be part of that, right? I'm bringing in a new hospitality and tourism degree this fall. Temple's hospitality and tourism program is ranked number 7 in the world, and we've looked at the market. It's like there's a great need here.
Sure is.
And Temple's got a top global program, and so I'm like, okay, talk to our main campus, let's do this. Boom, it's done. I've got 2 professors coming from the main campus. I'll go out and do some search. We've advertising this to students. If I was a Japanese university, I couldn't do that, right? Mm-hmm. And so really, if you look at innovativeness, creativity, it was really stifling. So fortunately, we didn't have to become a gakko hojin. Mm-hmm. We were recognized as a foreign university Japan campus. So now we're able to sponsor student visas. Now Japanese universities recognize us. Our student can get discount train passes.
How long has this been? For a year, 2 years now? What?
So that happened in 2005.
2005.
But
2005 that happened.
But I was part of that, right? Okay. So I was general counsel of the campus. I was senior associate dean.
So it's been a while. Okay.
Working together with Dr. Patterson. That together with, I think, the elevated visibility of Temple through that process, working with the politicians, it helped people recognize a little bit more what Temple was, and it brought credibility that enabled us to start to grow. So when I came in 2003, there were probably about 350, maybe 300 undergraduate students mm-hmm. that Temple had. Mm-hmm. Professionally, kind of graduate school, you probably had 300, 350, and then you had a bunch of non-degree students that were there. But Temple just was not very well known. Recognition happens, visibility goes up, and the climb for new students starts to happen. We have students in the United States that want an American degree, but they want a Japan experience. You have students here Japanese and non-Japanese that want a top international education in English, but they don't have the monetary means to go to the United States and to study there. And when you're in the United States as a foreign student, you can't work, right? You're away from home. So your costs are very, very high. And so as that starts to happen, you know, I was with Temple from 2003 to 2009. We went from probably 300, 350 undergraduate students to about 800 undergraduate students. That was a major leap. In fact, we started to go out in the Minami Azabu area and rent more office space and turn that into classrooms. So we went from struggling, barely meeting payroll, you know, in one building on probably 4 or 5 floors to, you know, now we're spread out over 3 different buildings. Wow. And things are going great. So you have the tsunami and the earthquake that happened in 2011, and a lot of the foreigners leave. You know, you had the Lehman shock that happened in 2008. So Lehman shock, earthquake, tsunami, and so, you know, Temple, the international population starts to drop, but the local population is still pretty stable, right, in terms of that. 2014, you've got maybe 800 undergraduate students, and Temple starts to build. Showa Women's University, very interested in partnering with Temple, building a building for Temple that Temple can lease. Showa Women's University, they have the British school on their campus.
They sure do. So Temple's there now too?
Yeah, and so they actually just outside of their walls had a big parcel of land, and so they built 2 buildings to attract Temple to come on in to this university campus setting. So this is where we...
And this is 2000 what?
So this would have been 2019.
19.
So 2019, at that point in time, Temple's at about maybe 1,200 students, along those lines. New building, a lot of excitement. Boom, pandemic happens, borders close down, international students can't get in. And I'm president of a university in Missouri, and I'm getting calls from Temple saying, hey, the presidency, the deanship, you know, here in Tokyo, it's vacant. You know, at first I'm like, guys, I just moved.
But now you have how many kids do you have at this time?
So we have 4 kids at that time.
I mean, but at that time you already had your 4 kids.
Oh yeah.
What were their ages? What were their ages?
So when I got that call in 2019, I've got 4, and they would have been 18, 20, 22, and 26.
Okay, so they're almost finished. Okay.
So they're almost done. So
yeah.
they're almost done, in fact, even my youngest, he had just started university. Phenomenal classical pianist, one of the best in the world. You know, he was off at Eastman School of Music.
The only one of your
in New
4
York.
kids?
In terms of
piano.
Oldest plays.
Too.
Number 2 plays, but number 4 is like world class.
And number 3 is your daughter.
No, number 1 is my daughter.
Number 1's your daughter, okay.
Yeah. Number 3 is my violinist. He's my my engineer.
1 girl and 3 boys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Girl up top, 3 boys down below.
Okay. So she's pianist.
She's a pianist / vocalist.
Vocalist, okay. And your second?
Second, Josh, he is my sports player, but he also plays the piano, just for fun.
All right.
Number 3, he's our engineer. I mean, he loves sports too, and he's our violinist. Right. And number 4, literally, I mean, he placed 3rd place in an international piano competition in Tennessee when he was 5. He's played Carnegie Hall 4 times. He's played the Kennedy Center. He's, you know, performed and succeeded in international competitions. He's been a top American finalist in piano competitions in the Netherlands, in France, Rome, Spain. So anyway,
that's amazing.
So he's been quite amazing. But yeah,
well,
they were all out of the house, and I mean, I just started a job in Missouri. A lot of things that the university didn't know about the condition of the university that were never disclosed, and so I'm getting calls from Temple saying, hey, this is open. You know, this is kind of right before the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, it was like, okay, we really need a strong leader to come on in. we know you love Temple. Temple's part of your fiber and being. And, truthfully it was. I mean, my study abroad experience here in 1997 was phenomenal.
Couldn't have been that way without
Couldn't have been
Temple.
any better. Yeah,
Right.
And, I got introduced to politicians and judges and, internships here. And it was just amazing. And then, coming back in 2003 and 2009, being part of the legal world here and the political world and those type of things, and bringing Temple through that. In 2009 we left Japan because of my youngest and his piano. We had discovered
his talent.
Well, we discovered his talent,
prodigy, yeah.
but Japan does not do a good job elevating talent, and
Because it's wade-wade.
it is, and we had connected with a university professor in the U.S. who was happy to help us when James is like 6. Here we come back with the same expectation, and the university professors are like, "What?
No, not going to happen.
Right?
Ain't not open up yet.
And we
no.
talk to the conservatories, and they're like, no.
No.
And we talk to the concert pianists, and they're like, well, we get it,
Yeah, but
right? Because
no.
we've gone overseas, but we're traveling, and your son needs the week, week by week stuff. And so we finally were directed to who is regarded as the top piano teacher in Japan for youth. And she listened to my son play, and she's like, he's just incredible. She's like, I'll take him. But the only time that I have that I could teach him was like Wednesday nights at 11 p.m. I mean, our son is 6, and this would be, an hour and a half away from where we live, and he'd be finishing up piano
11
lessons
p.m.
at midnight. Yeah, that's the only place that she could
But
slot
she
him.
did it. You did it.
Well, she was willing. No, we said we can't do it.
Okay.
I mean, we lived out in Chiba at the time, and
what'd
we
you do?
couldn't do that to our son. So we moved back to the United States.
For how long?
So I was in the U.S. for about 11 years. So I was at University of Wyoming initially as a professor, then as associate dean of their law school. So we did that for about 5. And then I was in Ohio at the University of Akron as dean of the law school for about a year and 8 months. The new president came in the same time that I did and didn't last more than a year and 8 months, and had done some really magical things at the University of Akron School of Law in terms of a turnaround, growing enrollment, new programs, innovative stuff. And so the board called me one day and said, hey, we've been watching the law school stuff. Do you think you could do that at the university level? We've got a lot of problems, and we need somebody to turn it around. So anyway, that's how I ended up as president of the University of Akron. And then University of Missouri recruited me away, and so that's where I was. Walked into a place that I thought was solid, that was not. It was turning into another turnaround. I'm like, okay, I've got the formula. I just did this at the University of Akron. I can do this when the phone is ringing from Temple. So, as we hit I think if the pandemic had not happened, I would not be here today.
I hear you.
Because I said, I will at least go through the process until you get to the point that you're going to go public, because I've got so much to do in Missouri to turn this university around that if they even know that I'm talking to someone, I'm not going to be able to make this work. So that was condition number 1. Condition number 2 was, as much as I love Temple, the timing was just off, right? And so I'm just like, timing-wise, I just don't think I can do this. But Temple asked 4 times. And I've got this allegiance to Temple, and so I was like, okay, I'll at least listen. But when the pandemic happened, 2 things changed. 1, the search, that ensured it was going to stay confidential and not go public. And then the second thing was, as we thought about it, we're like, okay, we helped Temple through a very difficult time, 2003, through 9. We've seen what Temple has become. They've got this new building. But now if the borders are closed and students can't get in, boy, they may be in a really bad spot, right? And so that kind of pierced my heart, and I was like, maybe I can take what I learned in the 11 years I was away from Japan, come back and help out. So when I came in, Temple was about 1,200 undergraduate students. Here I sit. Temple's at 1,850 undergraduate students. We've grown 50% in about 2.5 years. Undergraduate students will probably be over 2,000 here, and everybody is just blown away, because
give me
just
a few keys as to what you do to make that happen.
The biggest key in providing an education is putting students first. And it's very easy to say. I think it's much more difficult to do.
That's what I say, but what do you mean by that?
Well, from the top, it means my door is always open.
Okay.
And I'm accessible. Oh, they know it.
Well, I know. I see you giving out food. You're always out there. You're every place where they're going to be.
Absolutely. So I'm on the basketball court.
I know.
Playing with the basketball club.
Breaking your nose. I know you do.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting.
But the kids really can relate to that.
They do. And
they know you're there.
So here I am guarding somebody, right? And this is last week. And so dripping in sweat, one of the students looks at me and he's like, "How do you learn Japanese?" He's like, I need some tips. And I'm almost getting emotional on the basketball court because I'm like, that's why I do this. It's because I've got someone who's here from Hawaii, who's struggling with the Japanese language, who I'm putting myself in a comfortable enough position that they'll have that conversation.
That's right.
Right?
That's
right. The week before that, I took a group of 41 students up to Nokogiriyama. And so we're out on the ferry taking the bus across, and I'm up on the top deck, and I've got student after student coming to me asking me about careers, or talking to me about personal
so good
things.
You know what to do.
Well, it does, right? And it's just it's like having a conversation with my sons, right?
Well, they are your sons. I mean, they're your sons and your daughters.
And that's exactly what my wife reminds me all the time. She's like, I wanted 5 kids. Which is interesting for somebody who's Japanese, and I drew the line. But she's just like, I'm glad we didn't have 5 because you've picked up thousands and thousands of kids, that are there. But I mean, it really is. I mean, it kind of goes back to even my desire to serve a mission, and even before that, to kind of volunteer, just a service mindset. So if you have a service mindset as a leader in education, engaging with these students on a different level. I mean, you don't have university presidents handing out 1,100 cups of Baskin-Robbins ice cream.
And still having the respect from that student.
Absolutely.
See, because every now and then, being able to handle that, I think would be a challenge, first of all, for most people, because parenting, first of all, is something that people aren't taught.
It's true.
How to parent.
Absolutely.
The most important thing they'll ever do should they decide to become one.
That's right.
They're not taught how to do it.
Not at all. It's just, by example from your own parents, and whether they did it right or whether they did it wrong.
And you take out the things you didn't like.
Oh, absolutely.
That's all you do, and then you do the same thing, though.
That's right. You kind of reverse that.
So I really admire the fact that you're doing that. I saw that through the pictures I looked at.
So, but it is one of those things where, I give out my business card to students. It has my personal cell phone number on it.
Why wouldn't it?
People have said you're crazy, but I'm like, I know that the level of respect that students have is such that they're not going to abuse it. They're going to use it at the time that they need it the most. And I've had some really special experiences with students in times of crisis where they have reached out to me. I had a student away from family, thousands and thousands of miles away, and he was having a personal crisis and he was too embarrassed to talk to his dad, and so he shows up in my office at 7:30 at night, and he was like, I was thinking, okay, who could I talk to? And it was you, right? And so, that tells me that, okay, I'm getting through to these students. And, when you say student first, like I said, it's action, right? It has to be genuine.
You have to walk your talk.
And it has to be genuine. You have to have the trust. You can't abuse that trust. And, I think that really makes a difference. And so, even on the prospective student side, and parent-wise, other university presidents you wouldn't see at university information sessions or open campus, but I make it a point to be there and engage with parents and students.
Man, I think your religion does it, but it's not just your religion, because if that was the case, all Mormons would be the same way, and they're not.
That's true, yeah.
Okay?
Absolutely.
You came from a very special environment. And your father had to have some of that, and so did your mother, or else you couldn't have had the seeds planted.
Oh, absolutely.
The fact where you said your mother was so liberal with you and allowed you to go neighbor to neighbor to neighbor at 3 years old.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
I would never let my own kids do that, right? Parenting.
But she was in the environment where she could do it.
Absolutely.
And she knew the people.
And
she knew where you were going.
She knew the people, and it was good. And it really,
interesting.
As I give inspirational talks to high school students and college students, I tell that story about Alice, because there's so many lessons that come from that, right? About turning to others to learn what your strengths are, and to finding out what your weaknesses are and what you're good at and what the career paths are, right? There's just so much that's there. But yeah, I'm so grateful to my parents. I'm so grateful to my elementary school teacher that would let me go to the library.
Who's Alice?
So Alice was the widow.
The widow that told you should become an orator.
That said I had to become a lawyer, right?
Yes,
that would be there. So.
No, but I didn't ask this, and I should have asked it earlier. How are your parents doing?
Parents are okay. My mom's physically struggling right now, and it's just happened literally in the last couple of days. So kind of worried about her. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 2 years ago, and so she's been able to deal with that really well until probably this last week.
How old is your mother? How are your parents?
So Dad is 75 and Mom is 72.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's a sad thing, yeah.
But
they do okay.
They've been both very, very healthy. But it seems like Parkinson's is getting the best of my mom. But thanks for asking.
And they're in Salt Lake?
They're in Salt Lake.
Okay. Well, they're in a good area. At least they're in a good place.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
yeah.
for sure,
Good place, good medical care.
Yes. Wow. Before I end the podcast, there's a question I always like to ask.
Sure.
If you could magically go back in time and see the younger Matt and give him advice from what you know now, what age would he be and what time would you go back to?
Boy, that's a deep question, right? Probably, if I could do that, probably be back in the high school years, right? Because I do think back in the high school years, there was an element. Well, I know there was an element of pride. And hey, I can go and do anything, and I always have the right answers, and I don't need to listen to anyone else, and boom, I can just kind of go forward, right? It was that experience in Japan, my mission experience, that just knocked me in the nose, both literally and figuratively, right? That then I really had to reflect and kind of grow.
You became mortal, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have known that. Before high school, and I tried my best when I was in high school, but you kind of go back and you're like, okay, that pride, I probably shunned some people that I shouldn't have, not that I was a bad kid, or I had a lot of friends and runs in friend circles, but I really would have liked to have gone back and embraced some people that were outside of the popular circle that I probably should have paid more attention to. And it's interesting, sitting here at age 52 and kind of reflecting on that, going, oh, I wish I would have treated everyone well, right? And but I think
you
it's
never
just
know. You never know. And the thing is, you never,
immaturity.
because of the time we're in right now, and because the media is so prevalent everywhere, they might hear you say that.
Yeah.
The very people that want to know what you turned out to be and what you're like.
Absolutely. And I can only pinpoint a few instances that I would go back and change, but it's just like, oh, that person wanted my time and I completely ignored them. Or, I said something to someone and I didn't mean it that way, but it came across as something different and I didn't take the time to correct it, right? That really is the thing. It kind of goes back to what we talked about before. The negativity just kills me. And I try and do what I can to take the negatives, instead of dwelling on those, flip those into positives. And something that I've learned over the course of my life, I wish I would have known that back in high school, because I could have made the world an even better place.
Well, look, I think you have a lot more time ahead of you. I hope you do, so you can continue to do that.
Well, thank you.
Matt, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you. Absolutely.
It's been wonderful, really. And I will have you on again.
Sounds
I
good.
have to. I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars, because you're too blessed to be stressed.